everyone. Yeah, once again, thank you for joining us. Esther, with our partners, are very happy to have you in the discussion today. And as many you already know, Esther is a leading regional network connecting professionals and communities across Asia to build inclusive urban climate change resilience. We deliver our value through amplifying the local voices, facilitating collaboration among practitioners, supporting local initiatives for resilience, and connecting practitioner, community, government official, and the private sector to join hands in building urban resilience. We hope everyone will gain benefit from the webinar, treating this as a learning platform to exchange ideas and experiences to promote cross-learning among different individuals and groups. Today, I'm Farraz Theda, Member Relation Coordinator for the Esther Network, and I will be the moderator for the webinar. Before we start the discussion, I will explain the webinar ground rules. The general participants will be mute during the presentation, but will be able to provide questions via the chat feature you can see on the right side of your screen. And this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to the Esther website. Today, we will discuss about leading inclusive resilience. Various research has proved that children, youth, and women are at special risk of being deleteriously affected by climate change. As Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction stated that women, children, and people in vulnerable situations disproportionately affected. What kind of vulnerabilities that children, youth, and women possess? Why are the most at risk facing challenge caused by climate change, and how to involve them into our resilient practice? Through this webinar, we hope to better understand their priorities and learn from existing innovation that have been done by the communities and organizations. Now, please allow me to introduce our speaker today. We have Trang Hoang, currently works as the Regional Climate Change and Resilience Specialist at Plan International Asia Regional Office. Specifically, Trang is managing the BMUB-funded Regional Child Center Climate Change Adaptation, or often called as 4CA project in Thailand, Philippines, and Indonesia. This project aims to empower children and youth in the rural areas so that they can address various climate adversities. Also, we have Julisa Tambunan, the director of Mercy Corps GirlSPARKS, which previously known as the Girl Evac University. It's a global learning platform and behavior change catalyst for practitioners working towards unleashing the power of 500 million adolescent girls living in poverty and fragility. Both Trang and Julisa have more than 10 years experiences in the development sector. Now, we will begin the webinar. If you have any question during the presentation, please put in your question on the chat box because I will keep an eye on it. So then we can discuss it after the presentation. For the first session, we will hear from Trang. Hi Trang, how are you?
Hi Farraz. Hi Farraz and everyone. Can you hear me, Farraz?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, we're good to hear. So, Trang, we know that Plan International is focused in working together with children and young people. So, today we would love to hear more about your approach or method that you can apply, and also success story when you're working with them.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so please, Trang, the time is yours.
Firstly, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you Esther for inviting us to such a meaningful knowledge exchange session. And just like you introduced briefly about me, I'm currently working as a regional climate change and resilience specialist at Plan International, the Asian regional office, and it's my pleasure to share Plan's experience and insights about inclusion and participation with you. And I hope we will have a successful exchange session today. And for all of you who haven't known Plan yet, Plan International was founded in 1937, and we are a development and humanitarian organization that advances children's rights and equality for girls. And we work together with children, with young people, with our supporters and partners. And resilience is part of what Plan is working on to carry out our missions. And we believe that by enhancing resilience, children and their communities will be able to cope with and thrive even in the face of hardship. And we don't work just to strengthen resilience for children and communities. We expect that the process itself can be led by children and communities, especially girls and women. And this is a very brief introduction about organization to start off. And in my presentation today, there will be 4 major sections. The first one would be problem statement, basically, which means what is being wrong right now. And secondly, it would be resilience and inclusion, which I would give you a brief introduction about our thoughts of resilience and inclusion among many ongoing discussions about these 2 concepts. And thirdly, our approach and principles, basically how and what we are going to do to make sure inclusion in building resilience or like in general development. And lastly, what are our evidences of successes? So I know that most of the audiences today are working on climate change or related to climate change. So I will give a very quick one overview of the climate change impacts in general, just to start the discussion. And so basically, as you could see from the screen, climate change impacts, including shocks and stresses, affect an individual, household, community in every aspect of their lives. And from education to health, food security, economy, and exacerbating their vulnerabilities to violence and abuses. And this will undermine their rights in many ways. And there are stories around the world you might have heard to prove that climate change is pushing children and communities, especially girls and women, further or back into the vicious cycle of poverty and inequality. And you might have heard also the heartbreaking stories of child marriage, violence, abuses during disasters, conflicts, or wars for resources. They are prevalent. And in short, I just wanted to conclude that climate change threatens to hinder the development process and reverse development gains of many years. And we know that there is an undeniable shortage and evidently uneven distribution of the most important things, which are knowledge and information, resources, and support. And those are definitely needed for various social groups to cope with shocks and stresses, to maintain services and bounce back afterwards. However, sadly, girls and women are amongst the most disadvantaged groups in many cultures, in many geographical boundaries. And there are disturbing facts of school dropouts, early marriage, child marriage, death and injuries, displacement, and etc. anywhere in the world. And you can find out more in our publications, as shown here on the screen. And also I put the slide on the hyperlinks to these documents at the end of this presentation that you can access later. So what do we think about resilience? What do Plan think about resilience? To us, resilience is the ability of children and their communities to deal positively with disturbances, which we define as shocks and stresses that undermine the fulfillment of their rights. To achieve resilience, we need to have 3 types of capacities, including the absorptive capacities, adaptive capacity, and transformative capacities. The absorptive capacity will cover the coping strategies individuals, households, or communities use to moderate or buffer the impacts of shocks on their livelihoods and basic needs, while the adaptive capacity is the ability to learn from experience and adjust responses to changing external conditions. And lastly, transformative capacity is about capacity to create a fundamentally new system when ecological, economic, and social structures, making the existing system untenable. So, in short, this means that resilient communities need these three types of capacity that respond to different degrees of change. And one of the dimensions in our resilience framework is inclusive, and which brings me to this slide. We think inclusion is about bringing people into a process in a meaningful manner. It is a process of improving the terms for individuals and groups to take part in society and to fully enjoy their rights. Also, inclusion requires addressing the root causes of exclusion and to understand how intertwined these roots of different forms of exclusion are. And lastly, we also think inclusion involves improving the opportunities available to girls, boys, youth, in particular those who are vulnerable and excluded, including children with disabilities. So putting briefly, inclusion to us is about leaving no one behind. So, and how do we do that? We think so far the most effective approach is to put the marginalized group as the center of our work. As you could see from the screen, in the process of building resilience, we provide support at multiple levels, from individual capacity to household capacity, community and school capacity to system capacity. And this is all. We think that, and across our work universally, there is a belief that children are agents of change. And what make we think that children, to us, we have proof that children can involve in own processes of decision making that matter to their life. They can design, implement more detailed actions. They can be empowered with knowledge and skills and become confident. They can work with adults and government in school and community projects, and they should be involved as they will determine their own future, which benefits everyone. And in order to that, our programming approach involves supporting and working with children to help them learn, act, and share. These three pillars will support and magnify each other, as you could see from the graphs. And if you have a solid educational background, it is a good entry point for taking action. And if there are good results by the children, by the young people, they would be evidences for influencing works and eventually get more investment back to education. And during the process, children and communities are supported to lead actively. And in education, as you could see, they mostly about learning. They learn, the children and communities, they learn the knowledge and skills that are related to climate change, to disasters, to environmental protection. And during action, they actually gather data and analyze the issues. They formulate the solutions, their own solutions, and they implement their ideas. And after that, when they have good evidences, good results, they try to share their stories of successes and lessons. So in order for us to promote inclusion in our work, there are a few principles that I would like to summarize, as you could see from this slide, and more from this one, just to visually easier. And so we believe that the first step, or the first principle to promote inclusion in our work is to acknowledge the differences, including the vulnerabilities, needs and expectations, the capacities. Only when these differences are recognized and accepted, there will be solutions to fill the gaps. And the second principle would be to understand the importance of diversity. This is the next step to ensure the motivation is throughout our actions, which is the understanding of the importance of diversity. If without the understanding, this understanding at all levels, from project staff to partners to various community groups, it's very difficult to promote inclusion. And lastly, to embrace diversity. So after understanding the importance to acknowledge the differences, we would expect to create appropriate space and opportunities of engagement in terms of age, gender, disability, economic, etc., and additional support for the more disadvantaged groups. And the next part, I would try to summarize some of the highlights of our works. Firstly, what would make us the most proud is our child-friendly educational materials. Simply, you can't deliver your messages without speaking the languages of the groups. That's what we think, and that's why we aim in our educational materials to speak the languages of the groups. In this case, children. We try to make the materials child friendly, and so that the knowledge can be easily absorbed and spread. And we have also materials for children to learn and share as individuals or groups. We also have materials for teachers to support the children to conduct a child-friendly or participatory session. We try to translate the scientific knowledge about climate change and disaster, as well as environment, into simple daily knowledge and action. And as part of what I mentioned before, we aim to not speak for the children, but support them to be the speakers of their own knowledge and action. So by providing them tools, trainings, or the support and encouragement, as you could see from the pictures, the children prove well that they can be the speakers of their own action and knowledge. It takes time, but definitely it is rewarding. And to continue engaging them, we try to do things their way, in their ways. The internet fun, we make it fun. The pictures show different fun ways of engaging children and sharing knowledge. These activities appear in many of our projects, such as like quizzes, art shows, photography and videography sections, dramas, etc. And children, as well as women, are supported in own activities to discuss about and analyze about their issues, and they make their own decisions. In many of our climate change projects, community resilience is brought about by engaging different social groups, especially the poor and ethnic minority women. In our climate resilient livelihoods activities, for example, women sit together and discuss about their livelihood issues, their climate risks, and come up with their solutions, which are the combination of indigenous knowledge and knowledge about climate risks. And then they make decisions on what solutions they would take to overcome the adversities, and later they are supported to implement those solutions. In a few coming slides, I will introduce about our youth initiative projects where youths were supported to propose and implement their ideas of building resilience among themselves and for their communities in both urban and rural settings. The initiatives could range from awareness raising to technical solutions. Some of the highlights, these are some of our highlights. The first one would be the raising awareness on using public transportation. This project aimed to encourage more people to use public transportation and increase the quality of public transportation system. And multiple activities were organized, such as dialogues with the government, art performances, Facebook campaigns, ticket exchange for gifts, etc. And the results were very rewarding for such a small-scale project. Around over like 70,000 bus tickets collected and exchanged, and the Facebook reached 10,000 likes. Remarkably, they also called for the attention of the city municipalities to get support and commitment in improving the quality of the bus system. The second highlight would be the renewable energy for the urban poor. So a group of youths designed a wind power electricity generator made from plastic buckets and old printers to help light homes, to help the people there, the local people, light homes, and cook meals and cut the electricity cost. Even though the voltage output is actually quite small, it still makes a significant change for the families who are far away from the grid and also poor. And the last highlight of the youth initiative project would be the glasses that are programmed to recognize the gestures, the body gesture, including blinking, nodding, shaking, as pressing or moving to replace the computer mouse. So for the people who have physical disability, then they can use these glasses instead of mouse. So I just want to say that these some of the examples of the youth in like initiatives or children's projects. They all are very at a very young age, and they own their own explosive ideas, and they can make like remarkable contributions or changes to their communities. And as planned, we work with children and youth and communities to harness that power and direct it to building community resilience. And I think it could have never been done without engaging these groups into the process and also to promote their inclusion. So I guess that is the end of my presentation. And if you want to find out more about our works, you can have a look at on the links I have provided in the last slide of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Trang. Thank you for sharing about how to involve young people and children into resilient practice. I'm sure that's like a lot of discussion that we can have after this. And also about the resources that you mentioned on the last slide, we can put it also in a webinar recording and article a week after this. But now we also have Julisa. So hi, Julisa. Are you there?
Hello.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Good, we're good here. So Trang has just explained about how to involve young people and children into resilient practice, and I think it's very interesting that GirlSPARKS is focused only working with the adolescent girls. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think we would love to hear more about like why it has to be girls and what kind of approach and method that you apply into your program. So please, Julisa, the time is yours.
Thank you so much, Farraz. Hi, everyone. My name is Julisa, and I'm going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes to talk about how to be inclusive, but also how to make sure that we're intentional about it. Hold on, I think we have technical difficulties here. There you go. We're going to laser focus on girls for the next 15 minutes, touch a bit on their specific vulnerabilities, but also mostly talk about their inherent strengths and their resilient capacities. And then I'll share some examples from the ground on how GirlSPARKS apply goal-centered design in some of resilience initiatives. Farraz, I don't think the slide works. Hold on. I hope this works now. So Trang has walked us through the specific vulnerabilities of young people faced in the age of turbulent times. And I just wanted to touch a bit and not dwelling a long time on it, but I just make sure that we all acknowledge that in Asia specifically, there are more than 700 million of young people aged 15 to 24, and that comprises 60% of the world's youth. And during disaster, what is usually a time of life set aside for learning and adolescent development of livelihood is completely disrupted during when young people experience shocks and stresses. They're also aware of the possibility that this loss will never be recovered. So during disasters, adolescents tend also to be ignored as a target group or be intentionally targeted during intervention, and they're likely to be conceptualized as passive victims or active security threats. Again, during disasters, there are breakdown of social and cultural systems, exposure to violence and chaos, personal traumas, disruption of school. So obviously young people stop going to school, and absence of role models because maybe the adults are being displaced or died in the disaster. I'm going to talk more about girls now because the focus of GirlSPARKS, and we also want to make sure that at the end of the webinar, I hope people can understand how girls can contribute to important resilience community initiatives. To begin with, I just want to bring attention that everyone else has a head start on girls. In most developing countries, girls have lower levels of education. They have less access to education opportunities than boys. They also have limited access to work, and therefore, growing up, they have less opportunity to earn an income. We know that migration has been a huge topic, especially in building resilience of communities. And the feminization of migration means that increasingly it is girls who move to cities in countries other than that of their birth. So obviously this increases their vulnerability before, during, and after major shocks like natural disaster. So in crisis, girls, they're already vulnerable even before crisis. Now they have less access to resources and services. They most likely have higher burden of care and higher rates of sexual violence. They also are more likely to die during or after natural disaster, and that relates to gender balance in country or socioeconomic status. And also lack of skills that cause them to that cause this problem. And it's not necessarily because of biological differences, but because of gender vulnerabilities and gender capacity, that because of the way they have to behave in certain norms, they're not likely to develop these capacities to survive. And this is a fact. So of the 800 women and girls who die every day from causes related to pregnancy and childbirth, 500 of them die in countries that are considered fragile because of conflict or disasters. And humanitarian emergencies have gender-specific results that disproportionately affect girls, like Trang mentioned earlier. So it's not. I don't think a lot of programs don't necessarily recognize this. But when we do a lot of we're trying to be inclusive, the fact is we've learned that we don't reach girls because we think we have. So we operate most of the time we operate under the assumption that if we build it or if we distribute it or if we provide it, those will come, when in reality, they will not come. And that's mostly because of some of the things that hinders their participation in programs. For example, they have too many things to do in the households. They are isolated because their parents fear them going to school or being sexually assaulted. And that is why we need to be more intentional, making sure that we are deliberately target girls, finding which girls to work with, and trying to engage them meaningfully throughout the program. And this is there has been a lot of misconception because there have been a lot of children programming, youth programming, and women programming, but girls are not. They're not children. They're not youth. They're not women. They're different. And I think it's important to advance our current practice because the current youth policies and the data that accompany them block our view of girls and treat young people as one homogeneous group. But we know that skill and experiences of young people, even in the same community, can vary considerably. So historically, we know that programs for youth have favored boys, and as a result, investment have benefited boys more. So most vulnerable and the hard-to-reach girls are missed when youth programs are set up. This is just an illustration of a study that Population Council did in four countries. So in these 4 countries that they did their research, a lot of youth programs are missing the mark because when you work with 10 to 24 without tailoring your approaches based on age and gender, you tend to work with more older male. And then, of course, girls itself are different, right? It's not a homogeneous group. And often we look at girls in the community like this. They're all the same, 10 to 24. But in reality, this is what they look like. Like some girls married early, some girls have kids, some are older than others, some are out of schools. So if we don't tailor our intervention based on different vulnerability criteria, then it's likely we're going to only engage girls who are what we call we're facing what we call an elite capture challenge, or working with girls who are already connected to program, or girls who are easiest to reach. So we know that we've discussed that girls are not all the same, and it's important to be addressed and be intentional about it. So in GirlSPARKS, what we do is we make sure that we're being intentional, and we use girl-centered design, making sure that girls are part of and tailor the approaches based on their specific needs. I'm going to share some of the examples that GirlSPARKS using girl-centered design supported in the field. The first one is what we did in Niger. So this is a USAID funded program called SALKI, and it's a big DFAP program addressing food insecurity. And we know in the context in the area, they have consecutive droughts and natural disasters due to climate change. So what we did, we engaged girls. We find the most marginalized one. We listen to them and design with them. And some of the methodologies that we use is the safe space methodology, and we're using mentors to work with thousands of adolescent girls and making sure that the content delivered to build their protective assets are age specific. Some of the results, some of the resilience capacities that we built through this program is capital, economic activities, while we work with gatekeepers or caregivers to help address early marriage and reproductive health. And we also help them to address food security and nutrition. Some of the lessons learned that we've got from this program is that it's important to incorporate economic component, because we know that increased access to and the use of appropriate and diverse financial services and products is one of the most important resilience capacities. So we prioritize community involvement. We leverage local tradition, making sure that it's relevant and locally appropriate. We work with mentors and incentivize We also use standardized curriculum when necessary. The second highlight that I would like to share is the one that we did we're still doing this in Nepal. And this is a UK-funded Girls Education Challenge program. So we combined, because of the context in Nepal and its earthquake, earthquake and natural disaster, we combined Mercy Corps strategic resilience assessment with our goal-centered design methodology. So our theory of change for this specific program is that if girls are supported to make safe, healthy, and successful transition through secondary school, and then secure livelihood afterwards, then they will have increased individual and community resilience. And this program, we managed to find out that girls can contribute to important household decisions. They can help diversify livelihood and strengthen our early warning system as well. Some of the lessons learned that we've learned, some of the lessons that we've got through this program is, we know that marginalization intersects with factors such as age, gender, and power dynamics. So it's really important to address this in our resilience initiatives. The last one probably that I'd like to highlight today is what we did in Kenya and Uganda. And we have this Nike Foundation funded Girls Improving Resilience with Livestock program. And we work with pastoralist community in northern Uganda. It's post-conflict and climate change has resulted in prolonged and worsening dry spells. So our approach there is we improve livelihoods and agency of pastoralist girls. We also use safe space methodology there. We're working closely with key gatekeepers and private sector actors. So the program aims to create an enabling environment for girls to also access markets, because this is a huge problem, especially in communities like in Karamoja. The resilient capacities that we built through this program is increased access to use of financial services, increased social capital, and increased agency and decision-making power. Just 3 more minutes. What we learned about girls throughout our girl-centered design effort in this program is, the first one is, like I mentioned earlier, she's unique and she's not like other girls. Adolescent girls are not a homogeneous population. So designing a successful girl-centered programs requires an understanding of their unique needs and the diverse demographic of girls, whether they're younger, older, rural, urban, out of school, in school, and making sure that it's age appropriate. I talk a lot about economic development, and sometimes people are hesitant to do this with younger girls, but what we learned is she's ready for economic empowerment a lot earlier than we think. It's just, I think the most important thing is just has to be appropriate. So, for example, equipping girls as young as 10 years old with basic financial skills and knowledge can have immediate benefits, and that can contribute to community household resilience, then community resilience. The other thing that we also learned is she has to overcome more barriers. Like we said, everyone else has a head start on girls. So she has a lot working against her, but if given the opportunity, she can prevail. A lot of things hinders the ability for girls to participate in community resilience building, from a greater amount of household chores, gender-based violence, early marriage, and other enormous challenges. And this obviously limits the opportunities, but if we address that and be intentional about it, then it might work. The next thing that I want also to mention, and it's really important, is safety matters for her first and foremost. So if girls' safety aren't integrated into program design, then we put her at risk, and her participation in activities will be reduced. So that it's a no-brainer, but most of the time we're not being intentional about it. And this is the last one. She is a giver, and we know, and there has been a lot of studies that she improve her value in the community, her individual success can contribute to the overall community resilience. So this allows her to put into practice the knowledge she has gained, and also a sense of pride that she has something to give to others. And so I guess that's my presentation for today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you for the presentation, Julisa and Trang. Now we will begin the discussion. I want to remind that all participants who have a question or comments, please put it on in the chat box so that I can read it and we can discuss it together with the speakers. So the first question coming from Leah. What are the tools Plan or Mercy Corps use to assess girls' differentiated vulnerabilities and exposure to risk in the face of disaster, conflict, and violence? How do you make sure that the most isolated girls are part of the initial vulnerability analysis? And second, how do this initiative engage with men, boys, and duty bears at community and national level to ensure social norms that perpetuate gender-based inequalities are shifted? So please, Julisa and Trang, maybe we can start with Julisa first and move to Trang afterward. Please.
Leah, thank you for the question. So I think I'll try to answer first, and then I'll hand over the mic to Trang. So the tools that we've used to assess girls with different vulnerabilities, it varies across program, but what we do is we use specific segmentation tools, and it's under the Find Girls our Find Girls bucket. So we've been using a lot of population console tools such as Girl Roster and Asset Building for Girls. And then we combine them with our strategic resilience assessment. So in terms of working with men and boys and gatekeepers, we have different strategies in different programs, but mostly because during the Finding Her phase, we try to get buy-ins from their parents first, and their husbands if they're married. We begin early, so we try to get their buy-in early, and in making sure that when we create the safe space, we also get community buy-in and the parents' approval as well. So we work. When we do interventions in schools, because girls we don't treat them in like they live in a vacuum. Obviously, we work with their brothers, we work with their school friends, and making sure that we don't perpetuate the marginalization by not including men and boys at all in the intervention. So making sure that there are supportive agents in building girls' resilience.
Thanks, Julisa. Are you finished, Julisa? Okay. Hi, Leah. Thank you for the question. I couldn't agree more on Julia's voice, but I would like to add a few more things into the answer. The first thing is that besides the tools that we have to assess girls' differentiated vulnerabilities and exposure, we also have to pay a lot more attention to the process, because sometimes the tools can be different, but the process actually matters as well. So we need to pay attention to the participation of the girls or in general the vulnerable groups into the process first. And then in order to do that, we have to identify the barriers to prevent them from participating. And after that, we create the space and opportunities that are appropriate. I really like that word that Julisa brought up like a few times as well in her presentation, in terms of age and gender, to make sure that they comfortably and confidently participate in. And we also, in order to answer your second question, how do you make sure the most isolated girls that are part of the initial vulnerability analysis? This matters a lot during the selection process. When we do the surveys and the samples have to be selected from a few representative areas that have like either different risk or or the girls have to be from different economic profiles and educational profiles as well, to make sure that they have representation in the analysis. And if appropriate, we also try to create a separate area or more comfortable area for them to share their thoughts and their ideas and knowledge. And lastly, in terms of how do we engage men and boys and of course other duty bearers at the community and national level, I think this is a very long process and it will not wait for our results in working with girls, but more or less start at the same time. We need to work with them to actually start, familiarizing them with the concept of working with girls and working for girls. And after that, together, support them to provide additional support or encouragement or facilitation into girls' work. I think those are briefly my in response to the question there. I hope that it answers some of the question.
Okay. Thank you, Trang and Julisa, and apologize for the technical issue. Now, while we are waiting for another question, so I want to remind everyone that have a question, please just drop it on the chat box. While we're waiting for another question, I will start with mine. So I think in order to enable the environment for both young people, children, or adolescent girls, we need to work with various actors and stakeholders. So I want to know how to ensure that everyone is in the same page. I mean, not to only seeing youth and children as passive actor of resilient practice, but rather the active one who has role to contribute in building resilience itself. So please, Julisa and Trang.
Sure. So far, our methodology, the girl-centered design, lends itself to active participations of girls, right, as agents of change. So we make sure that, and again, we're not treating them in isolation, but because we try to find the hard to reach, the most marginalized girls, and then we include them in the process of designing the program. So rather than designing for her, we design with her, and in that process as well, we make sure that all of the important actors in the community are present. And I think most of the time, they just need I guess a lot of actors in the community need a lot of need a nudge that they can see that the girls are they have inherent strengths and they have capacities to contribute in the programs. So I guess what I'm trying to say is because we are methodologists and we do a lot of girls consultation session in designing programs. They're an active designer of the program, so it's not like they're not a passive recipients of any programs that we deliver.
And I just want to add more onto that point as well. That I think in order to bring all the stakeholders and actors on the same page, actually, I think it takes a lot of time because we know that in most developing countries, there is a universal stereotype and like negative norm against girls, that especially young girls, that they are too young to make decisions, and or they are too ignorant to make decisions. For instance, I'm sorry for the word ignorant, but it is true. It is a fact in many countries that we still believe, a lot of us still do believe that they are not knowledgeable enough to make decisions, and etc. That's why to really change such a mindset, like it has been deeply rooted in their mind and in the culture for such a long time. It takes time as well and a lot of efforts. And I think the reason why there are still people who believe in it is partly because they haven't really witnessed the changes, witnessed the capacity, the ability of the girls in changing, in contributing to sustainable changes. And I think our approach is try to bring more evidences. I think it's not just plan, but also our organizations or programs like GirlSPARKS as well. We try to bring in the evidences. We try to spread out the words, the stories, so that we at the same time trying to help the girls, but also trying to address the people around, so that they understand that these things we're talking about are real, are not just like words and programs. And in order to bring to make the to actually to make people not think or view the guns as a positive recipients, is also try to prove that they can make decisions, which mostly initiated by our programs, try to help girls lead in the process. And like I said again, repeat the cycle of sharing and spreading the stories of successes.
Okay. Now we have one question coming up from Audrey Anderson. Do either of your programs consider issues of girls' psychosocial resilience, given its importance for girls' ability to be agents of resilience in their household and communities? Maybe
Sure.
we can.
I can I can start. Audrey, good to have you here. So let me just go back to my slides on Nepal. Hold on for a second. So yes, we try to incorporate psychosocial support for girls, particularly in the most isolated and vulnerable. And because our safe space methodology is basically connecting girls with mentors and role models, and making sure that they have the peer support, they can make friends in the safe space. They can learn from role models. They can learn from mentors. That inherently increase their psychosocial well-being. And I think that's for the resilience initiative. So we focus a lot on psychosocial well-being before the disaster, but even after shocks happen, we make sure that it's something that we build first and foremost. So their psychosocial well-being before we try to introduce other approaches.
For plan, actually, in our programming currently, we are actually not as we don't stress as much in psychosocial resilience, but it is embedded in our programming because, like I said before, boosting girls in general confidence is important. It's an important factor to actually make them into to turn them into active agents of change, and that's why I'm glad to hear also the presentation from GirlSPARKS. We also do the psychosocial supports for during emergencies, but in our normal programming, unfortunately, we don't stress too much on the psychosocial resilience first, but more like we zoom out and look at it as a whole and try to support them like on the spot in terms of psychosocial aspect.
Okay, thank you. Now I have actually one question for Julisa and another last question for Frank, but it's a different question, so I will ask Julisa first. We understand that it's important to involve adolescent girls into resilient practice, but I think the crucial part is to assure donors, whether it's aid or private sector or even government official, to say invest on this sector. So how do you help any resilient program on this issue?
I think there have been a lot of researches and proving the worth of investing in girls, and I think donors have already they're investing a lot in girls. The issue is not about convincing them on how to make sure that they're investing in girls. It's about how to make sure that they reach the most marginalized, because again, like for example, BFIT UK8, they know they've invested hundred millions of pounds to build girls' resilience, but the latest study showed that they haven't really worked with the most marginalized ones, and I think making the link clear to donor, making sure that if you build the resilience of this hard to reach population, then you have higher return of investment. It's really important. So we have a lot of researches and findings that we can share with participants if you're interested in helping you to convince your donor to make sure that you're being intentional in targeting girls, because again, it's not about people are not acknowledging this enough. Tons of researchers are out there, but it's making sure that we're being very intentional in finding the right girls and engage them meaningfully throughout the project cycle. Does that answer your questions, Farah?
Okay, good. Now for Trang, you say that you work with the Renewable Energy Initiative and also with the minority women group. So I want to know how you ensure the sustainability of the program, how to assure that the community will continue to adopt the program, and do you also advocate the better policymaking to involve the minority women group in the resilient practice, or any other technique or success story that have you applied?
I think by bringing in or promoting inclusion in the works itself contributes significantly to the sustainability of the program already, because when we try to support any social group to analyze the only issue and implement the ideas, and after that support them whenever they have any problems, then that itself is already part of the facilitation of the local action themselves. So we just basically help them to start, or because of the a lot of hesitation and difficulty at the beginning stage, for them to start thinking or analyzing this issue or taking action. Once they go through the first pilot period, then they have more confidence, they have more knowledge, they have more hands-on experience in continuing their own action. Maybe it's not necessarily it will not happen exactly the same when they went through the program with us, but I believe that the process of active participation itself, about self-analysis and implementation, will help them in other local actions as well. And the act of bringing in the voices of girls and women and the most marginalized, including the poor, the ethnic minority, will change the ways of working even in their daily works. And I think that is the part about the inclusion, the sustainability of the program itself. In terms of the sustainability of the action, like for instance, we have supported a lot of youth groups to implement their innovations, their initiatives, and some of them are sustainable, some of them are not as sustainable, or some of them even fail. However, I think those all are important lessons. For not just the youth is just one example, but for the communities, for the youths, and any social group to learn from those lessons as well. So it's important to ensure not just their successes, but their participation, the meaningful participation in the whole process of programming.
Okay, thank you, Julisa and Trang, for answering all the questions. Now, I want to ask both of you to give your final remarks on how should we move forward with the building inclusive urban resilience agenda, whether in Asia region or in a global level. So, please start with Trang with your final remarks.
Thank you, Farraz. I think, like personal point of view, I think that in order to move forward, it's definitely necessary to build the motivation of different stakeholders on the issues of girls and women and the other marginalized groups. We cannot sustain the action for them, or cannot try to introduce our own thoughts to them that they can be sustained without the motivation from these stakeholders to take the action themselves. So I just want to say that it's important to join hands and make sure that all the stakeholders see the problems and they see enough so that they think that it's important for them to take action as well. I think that is the very that would be the sustainable way to move forward. Thank you, Farraz.
Thank you. Please continue, Julisa.
Sure. Okay. So I think my last remark is just sure that we're, again, I like to use this word a lot, but be intentional when designing your program, making sure that it's inclusive, but it's also tailored to specific groups' needs and vulnerabilities. And I know it's a given, right? Because we design program, obviously we try to address different needs of different groups, but you know, behavioral economists said much of our thinking is more automatic rather than deliberative. So we don't try to make our effort more intentional, then we're not going to get there. I guess the most important thing is it's important to also understand to move forward that girls can contribute to important household decisions. They can help diversify livelihoods. They can help strengthen disaster preparedness efforts, but they must be given the opportunity to do so. And it's important to draw the link between evidence, making sure that it's evidence-based, obviously, and try to demonstrate that the effort really works. I guess just continuing the conversation is important, and share best practices. So be intentional. That's my last remark.
Sure. Thank you so much once again. Thank you for the presenters, and thank you for everyone that has participated on the webinar today. We hope this can expand our knowledge and become useful to you. The recording of this webinar will be up on the ACCCRN.net 1 week from now. So we will let you know when it's available on our website. Please expect more activities from ACCCRN, and we hope you can participate in our future activities. Also, please fill the survey below so then we can improve our next webinar. So once again, thank you everyone and have a great day.
Thank you, Farraz, and everyone.
Thank you, Trang. Thank you, Julisa.
Thank you.